Last week, I fell awkwardly into a muddy puddle after the rain. My clothes were covered in dirt. All 10 eggs in my canvas bag were smashed, and the spinach was soaked in filthy water. My son, David, screamed hysterically over the phone. "Mom, look at yourself! This is what happens when you refuse to listen. If you had let the driver take you, none of this would have happened." But I want to tell him, and all the sons and daughters who spend their days worrying themselves sick, that I would rather fall on a muddy road while buying my own spinach than accept the spotless safety you provide. If you or your aging parents are slowly being locked inside a cage woven from love, then the next few minutes might offer a completely different way to live. My name is Maggie, and I'm 85 years old. You may wonder why an old woman who can barely walk steadily would insist on going grocery shopping in the pouring rain. It all began last month when my son, in front of the whole family, forcibly took away the keys to my old Bic. The expression on his face was that of a hero accomplishing the most dutiful act imaginable. "Mom," he said, "your reactions aren't what they used to be. What if something happens on the road? We couldn't bear it. You shouldn't be driving anymore." In their eyes, I was supposed to feel grateful. They believed that getting lost or having an accident was every elderly person's greatest fear. But David didn't realize that, in that moment, he was slowly suffocating my life, the way a frog is boiled gradually in warm water. Those Bic keys were not just a piece of metal with teeth. They were my measuring stick for the world, the support that allowed me to maintain my way of life. Every weekend, I used to take those keys and drive myself to the farmer's market in town to pick out the freshest tomatoes. In spring, I would visit the garden center, load heavy bags of soil and pots of marigolds into the trunk, and decorate my front porch beautifully. During the Double Ninth Festival, I would bring my homemade apple pie and drive to the sewing club with my friends. That car represented freedom in my hands. It was proof that, as a mother and a wife, I could still manage my own life and even take care of others. My husband, Frank, has been gone for 5 years now. The house that was once filled with laughter has become too spacious and far too quiet. And now, with the car gone, it felt as though the last engine of my life had stopped running as well. to make sure I behaved. David made another decision behind my back. Sitting at the dining table, he poured me a glass of warm water and said in a tone that left no room for discussion, "Mom, we've arranged everything. We're hiring a full-time driver. He's a retired school bus driver from the neighborhood, a very kind man. Wherever you want to go, just call him and he'll come pick you up. Doesn't that sound perfect? Safe, convenient, professionally taken care of." But as I watched the relief in David's eyes, all I felt was sadness. When buying a bundle of yarn requires making an appointment with a stranger, that isn't care, it's transportation. I was no longer Maggie, the woman who decided what she would eat or when she would leave the house. I had become a package that needed to be delivered safely. And sitting in the back seat while a stranger watched me with mixture of caution and pity felt even more suffocating than loneliness. So I refused. I dismissed the driver on the spot. David was so angry that he didn't call me for 2 weeks. But I found another way. I started walking. My knees ache whenever it rains, and my steps are heavier than they used to be. Yet every morning, I take Frank's old oak cane, grab my canvas bag, and walk nearly 2 kilometers. Inside my bag is a silver pocket radio I've had for almost 15 years, playing soft nostalgic songs, and a ball of gray yarn from a scarf I haven't finished knitting. Deep inside the park stands an old wooden bench with peeling paint. That's where I met Leo. Leo is a young delivery driver in his 20s. Every day around 1 o'clock, he arrives on his mud-splattered electric bike, carrying a cheap boxed lunch and covered in sweat. He sits on the stone steps beside me to rest. On the first day, I was listening to jazz and knitting with bamboo needles when Leo looked over and asked in his raspy voice, "Hey, Mayam, are you knitting a scarf? Looks pretty warm." I squinted at him, turned up the radio a little, and laughed. "Yes, for troublemakers like you, so you won't freeze your necks off in winter." He whistled, chuckled, and shoveled another mouthful of rice into his mouth. That was how our conversations began. There were no fake pleasantries between us. Every afternoon, old songs played on the radio while I knitted. He would complain about climbing endless flights of stairs, delivering packages, and I would tease him, saying young people nowadays were weaker than an old woman like me. Sometimes, when his face was red from the heat, I would pull a peppermint candy from my pocket and hand it to him. To Leo, I wasn't a burden that needed careful supervision. I was simply an ordinary old lady sitting on a bench, someone who could chat with him about everyday life and offer a little human warmth. In his eyes, I saw equality, and that equality was something I could no longer find in the anxious, controlling love of my children. Whenever he happened to be heading my way, Leo would use his little electric bike to carry my heavy vegetables and flour to the entrance of my alley. Then last week, a sudden rainstorm arrived. I insisted on going out to buy fresh eggs and spinach. On the way home, the muddy ground became slippery. My cane sank into a puddle, and I fell right into the mud. I dusted myself off and got back on my feet. But when David heard what had happened, he completely broke down. "Mom," he cried over the phone. "See, this is exactly what happens when you refuse to listen." As I listened to the tears in his voice, I felt strangely calm. When he finally finished venting, I spoke gently but firmly. "David, my child, I know you love me. But if you think protecting me means taking away my right to walk and choose my own tomatoes, then that kind of safety is killing me. I don't want to spend the rest of my life sitting in the back seat while others decide which road I should take. I would rather fall on a muddy path while buying eggs than sit in a spotless, perfectly safe room and quietly grow mold. I want to touch fresh vegetables with my own hands. I want to decide for myself what time I leave the house. I still walk to the park every day. This morning, the wind was strong and a light drizzle floated through the sky. My old radio was still crackling in my arms, and 2 peppermint candies sat in my pocket, waiting for Leo. As I approached the old bench, Leo was already there, holding a plastic rain cover. He waved at me from afar and shouted, "Hey, old lady, there's a typhoon warning today. Does that broken radio of yours still work? Come over here, I saved the dry spot for you." Leaning on my cane and feeling the gravel crunch beneath my feet, I felt incredibly grounded. And I want to say this to everyone who is growing old or whose parents are growing old. Don't sacrifice the vitality of life in the name of absolute safety. Knock on your neighbor's door. Touch the vegetables at the morning market. Knit a slightly crooked hat. You'll discover that the most precious thing isn't having a perfect, dust free retirement system managing everything for you. It's remaining in this real, imperfect world and continuing to live a life that truly belongs to you, a life filled with warmth and human connection. Life doesn't become perfect simply because you make all the right choices, but at least the person holding the steering wheel is still you. Thank you for listening to me. Please take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.